Mr. Martin George, good morning and welcome, sir.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Brother B.
Yes, all right. So yesterday we woke up with the news that we have an SOE, a state of emergency. Just give me an overview as to, well, the reaction from the public is long overdue. Do you share that same view? And let's speak about what the results can be if this is done effectively.
Well, the thing is, Brother B, my concern is that I hope that this is a specific targeted action that is being taken by the government and the Ministry of National Security and the police. I want to hope that it is not a scattershot approach. Reason being, you ought not to invoke a state of emergency as a catch-all or a sweep-up, and basically, in an attempt to shake the tree and hope that something falls out. It's supposed to be, if you are using it for this purpose, that you have specific targets in mind and you need this as an adjunct or supplement to the powers of the police in order to be able to effect very quick arrests and seizures and detentions, so that way you can now process these people whom you have as your specific target. I was very concerned and I would say disappointed to see yesterday the start of roadblock exercises. Because if you're doing roadblocks, then that tells me you don't have any specific target in mind. You basically just inconveniencing law-abiding citizens who trying to go about their business. You snarl in the traffic, have everything backed up, jammed up, and what you're going to do, you catch somebody with a broken headlight or a broken tail light, or somebody with an expired driver's permit. That's not the purpose of a state of emergency. So, I think if that was part of the start of the exercise, then it seems to me that basically this is just a fishing expedition, and that is very concerning. It can be used effectively if you have, as I say, specific targets that you're going after and you go directly to them. It can't be that you are going to, have thousands of persons and vehicles snarled in a jammed up, backed up roadblock, and you hoping that what you find among all those people a gang leader who is sitting there waiting and slowly going into the arms of the police in this roadblock. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
All right, so the purpose of the SOE, I just want to read this over, is intending to address individuals who pose a threat to public safety, particularly those individuals in criminal activities and illegal use of firearms. All right, so we have seen, and you would have been one of those who, when Christmas list came to this country and exposed gang leaders with illegal firearms, and there was no aggression to arrest these individuals and to see if they're guns.
In fact, they arrested Christmas list himself.
They arrested Christmas list. So let's speak to whether the government is serious, because I was taken aback. Arrest was made after these individuals were exposed. So let's say, all right, so let's go to the purpose of this exercise, and it's to target those individuals. Does the police have the intelligence? Do they know who these criminals are? Are they serious about addressing these individuals? Your perspective.
Brother B, you are asking exactly the questions that are concerning me, because I have said, and I will say it again, this state of emergency cannot be a substitute for genuine, dedicated police work on the ground. In other words, you ought to have done your intelligence gathering, your data collection, your information culling to ensure that, look, you are now armed with that information. So therefore, once the state of emergency is proclaimed, you go into specific houses, specific locations, specific persons and individuals you're looking for, because you already have your information and intelligence. That's what I'm saying. So therefore, it doesn't appear that that is what is happening now. it seems that this is just basically a grand PR exercise, and you go out in the streets, and you create these roadblocks to make it look to the public as if you're working, as if you're doing something, and yet still you are not doing the basic police work that needs to be done in the first place. But we don't want to end up with a situation like 2011 where you arrest a whole set of people at random, under unspecified allegations, and it is shown later on that you don't have the evidence to support it.
All right, so let's go to the police and the extra powers that they have now, given that the ordinary citizens' rights are suspended. You mentioned something there that happened in 2011, but I want to go to this whole question of the suspension of bail. Bail provisions will be suspended under the regulation and entered into, for this. So what I'm coming at is the rights of the citizens. Your rights are suspended. Let's say that they break into my home and they have no evidence. Can I, in turn, sue? Because there are some cases from 2011 that people are still waiting for their money from suing the state.
Right, but they successfully sued, and the point is that's the point, and that's what I keep saying, So the law is such that even though persons' rights are suspended for this time, they are not terminated. So, in other words, once the state of emergency is lifted, and I mean, it can't go on forever, and persons are able to say, well, listen, what was the basis for you coming to my home and arresting me for this length of time? If the police cannot produce the evidence upon which they formed a conclusion, and it has to be a reasonable basis, then the courts will stand with the citizen and say, no, that's a violation of the person's constitutional right. So even though you had the power to enter my home, you must have a basis for doing so. You can't just be entering people's homes at random or willy-nilly, because you think, or no, you have to have some kind of intelligence. And that's why I keep saying, Brother B, has there been this exercise of gathering the intelligence? Let me tell you, Brother B, I mean, as much as we in the business community welcome some action by the government, you have to wonder whether this calling of the state of emergency was just a knee-jerk reaction and an act of supreme desperation. And the reason why I say that, look, even the regulations, look how long it took for them to come out with it. It was sometime around 9 o'clock last night that I first saw any sight of it. And this is from a press conference at 10 a.m. and a declaration of a state of emergency a few hours before that. So, in other words, it seems as if it's being patched together as we go along. Now, I'm not pouring cold water on the idea. I'm fully in support of any serious effort by the government, the Ministry of National Security, and the TTPS to curb the crime wave that has engulfed the nation, even Tobago. Because I keep reminding people that while the official statistic says 25, let us not forget there are 3 bodies that the police have not yet classified as to how they died. That's the lady and the 2 young children who were found in the water tank. As I keep saying, even if somebody wants to, postulate or surmise or assume that maybe the mother might have committed suicide, those 2 little children didn't commit suicide. You understand me, Brother B? So, in other words, and then there's also some allegation that even the mother might have been a victim herself. So, let's understand, Brother B, the actual murder count in Tobago might be 28 and not 25.
Okay.
It's as bad as that. So, we need to do something. And I agree and I am in support of this. As I say, I just hope that there is the underpinning of the actual police work, with them having done their intelligence gathering, their data collection, and that they are just going at specific targets.
Okay. Let's bring the business community here, given that your role in the chamber, and of course, Yesterday, listening to the news, there was this concern that Carnaval 2025 would be affected, given that we have declared a state of emergency in this country. Any visitor or any visitor to any nation or intending to visit will not be convinced that their safety would be first priority, given a state of emergency was announced. Let's speak of course, there is freedom of assembly. The business community would not be affected because there's economic activity that would be allowed to go on as usual. However, from a visitor standpoint, how does that affect the tourist industry?
Well, let's understand that for most of the overseas visitors, their flight bookings, their hotel bookings, etc., paying for the carnival costume, all of that would have been done long in advance. So therefore, persons are not going to likely give that up, especially if it is that they have the reassurances that public gatherings are not affected, freedom of assembly, you're free to move around, freedom of movement, etc. Then I think at the end of the day, the carnival spirit is going to trump that. So I'm not so worried from a business perspective at all. And I don't think there are going to be any mass cancellations because it's going to involve lots of money for the persons canceling. So therefore, most people will not cancel. They will still go ahead because once they realize life continues as normal for the ordinary law-abiding citizens, then I don't think it's going to have any major impact in that regard.
I want to go to this whole question of the bail. Obviously, suspension of bail. Police can hold you up until 24 hours. And of course, there's no bail. Let's say that you are a suspect and they arrested you. Let's speak to that. Give me a legal perspective as to what.
Well, I am still struggling to understand the purpose of that particular provision because right now the situation is that the police can hold you up to even 72 hours without a charge while they do their investigation. So I don't understand this 24-hour period that I am seeing there. But I mean, there's a lot to unpack in the regulations. So maybe there's something, that you can delve down into the details that could justify this, emphasis on this 24-hour period, because it does make sense. Because even now, without any state of emergency, if the police arrest you, they could normally hold you up till 72 hours, and sometimes they hold you even longer than that. And it's only if somebody then goes to the High Court on a habeas corpus application, and the police have no justifiable basis for having held you without a charge, then of course the court will order that you be freed. But I mean, you already have 72 hours, so I don't understand why you need a state of emergency to go and then reduce it to 24 hours. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. But as I say, I want to still give the government the benefit of the doubt. And the regulations came out very late last night, so maybe in the light of day, we will see the logic or sense behind that 24-hour provision.
There are those who are suggesting that there should be curfew in quote-unquote the hot spots in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you subscribe to curfew imposing in those areas?
Well, the way this has been ruled out and laid out and explained by Minister Young and Minister Hines, they have suggested that this is supposed to be specific, targeted individuals. So therefore, there clearly would be no need for any curfew in any hotspot areas if it is that you are going after specific targeted individuals. You go after those individuals wherever they may be found because they don't have to stay in their area, if you understand me. They could be somewhere else, but wherever they are, you go after them. So in that case, I don't see any need for a curfew in a hotspot area.
But let's go to the approach going forward. Obviously, you spoke about roadblock, and that's a random thing to seek out whom they may luckily find, maybe with arms and ammunition. However, there are technologies that I have been clamoring for, and I think any sensible person in these times, the criminals are using drones, Mr. George. Do you see that employing the technology would assist in bringing success to this venture?
Well, you see, and that's exactly the point that I've always been making, Brother B. We must never shift the primary responsibility for public safety and security from the TTPS and the Ministry of National Security and the leaders in government. That's their role and responsibility. And declaring a state of emergency doesn't change that. And in fact, it's not a substitute for the work that is supposed to be ongoing all the time by the TTPS in terms of their investigation of crimes, their detection of crimes. Look at how abysmally poor the detection rate is. So, in other words, you don't even know who committed the murders. It's as bad as that. So, therefore, you ask yourself, how is a state of emergency going to help you to go and arrest persons if you don't even know who to arrest? Look, the murder committed right outside the Besson Street police station. Right outside. So where the cameras? You're telling me the station doesn't have cameras? How come you can't even tell us who committed that murder? That is so embarrassing, But nobody seems to be embarrassed in the TTPS about that. That a murder was committed right outside the Besson Street police station, and up to now they can't say anything about who possibly committed the murder. So therefore, okay, you have a state of emergency now, which gives you powers to go and arrest people. Okay, who they going and arrest for that murder? If they don't even know who committed it. And that's my point, and that's what I keep saying. Let's not be distracted by this idea of a state of emergency, because it could end up just being a smoke screen and a PR exercise, to make it appear that something is being done, when in fact the basic police work of going undercover, trying to seek out who the actual criminals are, who the actual persons are who commit these murders. Where is that information? If your detection rate remains so low, then that means you don't know who committed these crimes. So therefore, who are you going and arrest?
All right. Let's go to this whole question of these illegal firearms that are coming into this country via our quote-unquote porous borders. And they like to use that term as though it's something good. Let's deal with that. And how do we treat with these porous borders monitoring so that these high-powered rifles and ammunition are getting into this country, Mr. George? It seems as though it's an open sepulchre.
Well, Brother B, I could tell you the state of emergency is not going to solve that. Because that problem is way bigger, wider, and deeper than just the, giving police extra powers. Because you're talking about scenarios where things are being orchestrated from on high. Okay? It's not the little bandit in the street who is importing these high-powered rifles, He probably can't even fill out a customs form, if you understand me. So it's persons who are bringing in things by containers or whatever, or those who are bringing them in through the illegal ports of entry, as you say, who are arranging for these things to come into the country. So therefore, your state of emergency, is it that, okay, you've heard the politicians speak repeatedly in the parliament about the big fish. Are you using the state of emergency to go and arrest the big fish? I would hope that they would. If you understand me. In other words, you are supposed to know, well, okay, who are the major players? Because you're talking about a multi-million-dollar enterprise. So therefore, you're talking about persons with deep pockets and with lots of power and influence. So I am hoping that with these additional powers you are giving the police now, that you are going to be arresting some of these players and say, well, look, these are some of the major importers of illegal firearms into the country. We have arrested them. Don't go and arrest a man on the corner for, a little joint of weed, and say, well, yes, you're using the state of emergency to do that. Because that's the kind of stupidity we've seen in the past.
All right, so very recently, or not so long ago, we've had a situation where a legal firearms dealer was followed and arrested in Barbados, and then we had to let him go because he was legitimate in his business transaction, quote unquote. I given that we have those individuals who have the right to import and export, or to import, as it were. Speak to that, because you're speaking about those people, as you mentioned, have deep pockets and influence and so on, and may have the right to so do. Give me a perspective from that, Mr. George.
Well, the thing is, I mean, they are supposed to keep their records. They're supposed to keep their books. The police have the power to just go in at any time and subpoena their books, their records, etc. Because you are only supposed to be selling to legitimate holders of FULs or FUECs. In other words, if somebody has a firearm user's license, or if it is a company, a security firm has, FUECs, firearm users employees certificates, which allows their employees to hold and bear and carry firearms. It's only those categories you are supposed to be selling to. You are not supposed to be selling to bandits and criminals. So, I mean, that's where the police need to monitor and do their work. And if it is that you find one of these legitimate firearms dealers doing that, then, I mean, you're supposed to make the greatest example of that person, because then that is creating a monster right within our own backyard. You know?
Mr. George,
So, I mean, if that is the situation and the police have evidence of that, then by all means, I will support them, taking whatever action against somebody like that. The problem with the Brent Thomas scenario is that the police sought to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction, which they do not have. The TTPS is limited in its jurisdiction to the borders of Trinidad and Tobago. So their powers are only exercisable in Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, they have no authority to go to a foreign country and arrest somebody and bring them back home.
but that's, all right, so let's do a little policing ourselves. Obviously, you would have to ask what led to that. The intelligence obviously had to have some merit for that kind of action to be taken, Mr. George. And if
Well, actually, Brother B, if you look at the judgment of the Honorable Justice Rampasad, where he slammed the police and their investigation, the analysis that he gave exposed the fact that the police actually did not have the intelligence or the information or any proper basis for the arrest of Mr. Brent Thomas. So it's actually quite the opposite, and he called it a tremendous abuse of police power. So, and that's what I keep saying, Brother B. I am hoping with this state of emergency that the police have already done their homework, because if you have not done your homework, you will fail your exam. We know that since primary school, Brother B. That's why your teacher always keep telling you, do your homework. So have the police done their homework? Have they gathered their intelligence in advance? In other words, if this were a planned operation for the calling of this state of emergency, you are talking about months and months in advance that there would have been the gathering of. So in other words, the police are supposed to have a list since yesterday morning of 15, 20, 50, 60 individuals. Right, these are the ones. And then next to each name, you have all the details of the evidence you have gathered and the information you have culled in relation to that person to support and justify your going to arrest them. You are supposed to have your statements from the witnesses, all right? Your physical evidence, your DNA tested, whatever. You're supposed to have all of that in advance. And then now, with these powers that you have been given, you say, right, we're going and we're grabbing A, we're grabbing B, we're grabbing C. So in other words, that should have started already if they had that information. My fear is they have not done the homework. They do not have the information. They do not have the intelligence. All they have is a suspicion. And therefore, they now go in and embark on a fishing expedition.
All right, Mr. George, we want to thank you for being with us. Hey, just for your New Year's wish to the public, to the nation, of course. We want peace and love.
Well, Brother B, I am hoping for peace. for Trinidad and Tobago. I can't hope for anything else because let me tell you, unless we get a handle on this crime situation, we are lost as a nation. And I say as a nation because, in the past, Tobago used to laugh and say, well, crime is in Trinidad, it's not in Tobago. No, don't be laughing anymore. It is homegrown, homebred, and the chickens have come home to roost in Tobago. And we need to recognize that and deal with it and bring back Tobago a space and a place of safety, security, and sanctuary.
Excellent. We want to thank you very much for being with us this morning, Mr. George, and all the best
Always a pleasure, Brother B. And all the
2025
best
and
for the
beyond.
new year.
Yeah, man.
Thank
All
you.
right.